What happens with the FASD? Okay, looking at their developmental course, and I don't think I gave you this one. Their developmental course in infancy, they have poor habituation. They don't set up a sleep, awake, eat cycle. They're all over the map. That brand new baby that you have to set up all those cycles and patterns and wait for them to set, you're still waiting for the 6-month-old to set up a schedule of how they're going to eat, sleep, wake up. They fail to thrive. Full-term baby at 3 pounds. They have a poor suck reflex. You get the bottle in there and they won't nurse. Very often, even in the most caring home, even in your home, this infant will fail to thrive. They don't put on weight, they don't eat, they don't reach developmental milestones. Frequently, they're on the bottom of that growth chart. Think of them in the bottom 1 percentile. As they hit preschool, 2 to 5 kind of age, they have delays broadly. Delays in walking and talking and toilet control. They are often hyperactive. They squirm, they bounce, they roll over. They look ADHD. That's because all through the frontal lobe, they have areas of those overgrown, non-connected neurons. You just got spots of blackberry bush in there. So the frontal lobe can't work right. So they squirm, they bounce, they're inattentive. When you put an ADHD med in on top of this brain, this is a brain that doesn't understand the messages coming at them. My husband is German. We've gone to Germany. I can't speak German. I can barely handle English. But I have discovered when people shout it at me, it doesn't make me any happier. Doesn't make me understand it any better, and it tends to irritate me. When you put a stimulant-based drug into this kid's brain, you are now screaming in a language he doesn't understand. Is that going to make his behavior any better? Not likely. Up the wall, across the ceiling, down the other side. Tantrums, irritable, throwing things, blowout. That down and dirty, if this is a true ADHD child that I call a primary ADHD, stimulant-based meds will show you an improvement very rapidly. Now, you may need weeks to months to have the full level and the full effect, but you'll start seeing positive, in terms of he sits down and shuts up, benefits very, very rapidly. In these kids, very rapidly you see explode. My system will look and go, oh, look, bipolar. No, wrong meds. Broken brain. Get them off the stimulant-based med. There are other meds we can use with this brain to soothe it, to make that frontal work as well as it can, but it's not a stimulant. We need to go in on beta blockers. These are hypertensive meds, things like propranolol and blood pressure medications. There's Klonopin patch, and those work much better in this brain than do the stimulants, because now we're shrieking at them in something they don't understand. Very often in preschool and in early latency, we kind of miss that this kid has a problem because they're age 4 and they look 18 months. They're little itty bitty. They look like an 18-month-old. They act like an 18-month-old. It's great, except for they're 4. A friend of mine adopted a sibling group that she had fostered and then adopted, and she has an interesting life. One of the third child in it, her little boy, is fetal alcohol affected, and she was perseverating last year saying, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Matthew's going to be 6. I have to put him in kindergarten. And I said, problem in that? She says, they're going to think he's 6. I went, oh, yeah. As I'm looking at, Matthew doing his thing, you look at him, you think 3. He looks 3, he talks 3, he acts 3. And now we're going to put him in with 5- and 6-year-olds. And she's just going, I don't want to put him there. He's going to look weird. So we tend to miss it in preschool because we think of them as being much younger than biologically they are, because they look it, they sound it, they act it. And it's not until we start lining them up against other kids at school we hit some real problems. Delays in physical and cognitive development. They lie, steal because they don't have the impulse control, not because they're evil little kids or nasty or poorly taught. How many of you saw something as a kid and wanted it? You know? Some of us even then helped ourselves to it, unless our mothers got us. In this kid, it doesn't matter how many times mother catches them doing it, how many times they have to take it back, how many times they have to do all this stuff. They flat don't have the brakes to not do it. Those that do have brakes, they're breaking on ice. You know, it is really tough. They lie not because they're bad people, but because they're thinking, why did I do that? We are famous for saying, why? Why did you do that? When you're asking somebody why, you're asking them, justify to me in some way I think is good enough, or lie. The kid looks at this, I can't justify to you, I only got one other pathway. You know, so we set them up into these things. Their poor ability to abstract. Yes, ma'am.
How do you know the difference when you have an ADHD child to whether they're FAS?
That's the tricky part. One is the really good evaluation, and down and dirty is a medications trial. You know, and to a certain degree, it doesn't matter in terms of a lot of what we're going to do are very much the same. What matters is what medications go on board, because one set will help one set of people and one set will hurt that's the other set of people. But in terms of handling it, how we're going to do it, we're going to do it in much the same way. They all have an impaired impulse control, an impaired concentration, an impaired ability to think through their options. So we're going to do much the same regardless.
So which way is it that should a child be tested? Do FAS first or ADHD first?
If we know that this child had a prenatal exposure to significant alcohol and they are lightweight, they are small body, I'm going to go there first. I'm going to go fetal alcohol.
What if they're not?
If they are regular body size, if they are, you know, in anything, you know, halfway up, you know, the 50 percentile or better, I'm going to test for ADHD first.
Well, I've got two that are sisters.
Mm-hmm.
One is lightweight, one is...
And to be quite honest, my friend who adopted the sibling group, these three kids were born within 30 months. One has FAS, one has ADHD, and one doesn't have anything. You know, and she drank the same amount all the way through. Depended on her diet, other things going on, that kid's resistance. So one might be FAS, you know, if you know there's a drinking past, and she's very lightweight, I would go that direction. The other one, the more solid-bodied and that, I would look first ADHD and then secondarily for FAS.
Well, what if she doesn't have signs of ADHD?
Then she might just be fine. This might just be a kid that's struggling getting through life. Not all acting out behavior is pathology. And, you know, that's the tough part when we start talking about true pathology, making that line between the kid who's just had their life disrupted, who want to know, can I trust you, want to know, you know, what's going to happen to me next. You get some of this behavior. My system is really bad about acknowledging that. We're really good about putting this kind of label on people. You know, we like these because it gets us better funded, gets us more money. There's a nice thing to say, but it's true. So ever moving happily forward here. Elementary school is going to be a tough time for them. Wait till you hit adolescence. Suddenly elementary school looked real easy. These kids often will enter foster care in their early teens. Very often they were in an adoptive home because they came out of a substance abusing home, parent rights were terminated, or the parent gave up the child. They were adopted in, at least in the old days, with very little information. And what we have in adolescence, one of the best descriptions I ever heard was by a parent who said, I have a stretched out 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old who is 5'8" and 160 pounds. And think about that. That's a scary little proposition. And when this kid is now eyeball to eyeball or better with their parent, particularly mom, and says, I don't have to, when she says do something, this is the #1 reason for failed adoptions in the early teen years, is this is a fetal alcohol impacted kid. And the parent just flat didn't sign up for that. And this is going to be a really tough little thing. Kids are blowing out badly primarily because they're angry. By and large, as a statistical average, they reach their academic ceiling between 3rd and 4th grade. And then we hammer on them for 8 to 9 years. You're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. How long would you like to hear that? And how angry would you get? And that's what these kids are hearing over and over and over. I had a nephew who had mental illness, but he had many of these same problems. He could not do fractions. You know, I'm not great at fractions, but I could bumble my way through them enough to get out of 3rd grade. He cannot do fractions. He's 22 now. He brought home fractions, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I went into the school and said, is there anything else in math besides fractions, or is fractions the only thing that exists? And they said, well, he certainly can't do anything else till he has fractions. I said, let's pretend he has fractions. Let's move on to something else. Because this is a 6'3" now young man who's about 220. You don't really want to tick him off in the grand scheme of events, because he's not all that well socialized with that lack of frontal lobe. He was getting angry with the same math coming at him over and over and over. Here's where we need the IEP to say, this kid has reached their academic ceiling. Now we need to quit hammering them about this, and we need to start teaching them, what do you need to be a grown-up? What are life skills? What are communication skills? What are travel in the community skills? I got my nephew through high school only because I got him into the DECA program, distributive ed, and I had him working as a bag boy at Albertsons. And he got school credit for doing that, because there was no way he was going to make it through the school. Just flat wasn't gonna. So with that, we need to be adapting that school system. Some are very nice and some are not. Yes, ma'am.
At one point I had 3 kids in my home. I don't have any now. I'm just doing respite, thank God. But and I noticed how important it is important it is for parents to really be the negative, taunting against the kid, because one of the kids was telling, when I was, talking to them, and says, you have to go to school. I want you to be somebody. I want you to do this. But when she was cutting class and everything, and I kept telling her, you're not going to be anything. You're not going to be nothing. I didn't know how
and
that was.
You weren't trying to harm her in any way. You were trying to motivate her.
Right.
But having just watched the Olympics, you realize what we were watching there were the prime athletes in the world. Who remembers who got number 2 in something? If you're not number 1 in the universe, does that mean you're nothing? And we tend to say, you got to achieve, you got to do this, and we're so used to saying education, and I believe deeply in education as a pathway out of a lot of bad places, but if that's not your forte, if you're not a student, and you're never going to be a student, then we have to find other ways. Skills, job skills, social skills, self-care skills, and teach people that you don't necessarily have to be an A student. I love education, but not everybody's going to get a high school diploma or even a GED. Does that mean you're not a successful human being? It's one thing to encourage education, and it's another to say it's the only facts.
But it went on to, I think it did her a little bad. It kind of harmed her in a way, because as she was growing up, people would ask her, what do you want to be? What are you going to be? I'm not going to be, I ain't nothing. I ain't going to be nothing. And they said, why? Because my aunt told me that I wasn't going to be anything. So
it's amazing the things they listen to.
Yeah, right. That's right. But we as parents can play a negative part in there, but not really knowing the damage.
Without meaning to. And I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, what can I do to mess up my kid today? And then go forth and do it. Yet many of us seem to manage to hit every one of those spots that were possible throughout the day. So just as much as you can, be aware of the message going across. And we are such an educationally focused culture, and I like education. You're all here. I like education. But in doing this, if that's not your forte, does that mean you're junk? Does that mean you're going to grow up to be nothing? And that's the double-edged sword of this all. But in adolescence, they can't hang with the herd. And that is the most important thing in an adolescent, is to be able to be with a group. And here's where we got huge problems. Years ago, I used to work in South Central LA with gangbangers. And gang provides family. It provides connection. And it is a huge magnet to these kids because they have a purpose in the gang. They're wonderful fall guys. They are also wonderful servants to the higher powered. They're the ones who, remember the little cartoon dog that's bouncing around going, anything you say, Spike, anything you say? That's exactly what these kids become. The gangs bring them in because gangs will take anybody. A warm body is still what we need. And you're a good fall guy. Because when we're all in the abandoned house and the cops show up, 5 of us run. 1 of us still standing there going, where'd everybody go? Guess who gets caught? And then you don't rat out your brothers or sisters, so you're the one standing on point. Gangs love these kids, and they're used and abused badly by them, but they have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of worth. I'm not going to be an academician, but I'm best and meanest in my gang. Fastest growing gang membership right now, young ladies, 9 through 13-year-old young ladies. I've still got buddies down in South Central. They tell me in LA County, a drive-by is as likely to be done by a young lady now as a young man. Isn't that great, ladies? We're finding as aggressive as our male partners. Diagnostic eval. There is no single test, interview, eval that's enough or adequate to diagnose either of these disorders. So the one doc who says, doesn't look like it to me, well, thank you for your input. Now we're going to go for the other 15 people we need in this crew here. So an effective diagnostic evaluation has many parts to it. Number 1, a good medical evaluation. Now this is more than when they go in and get their height and weight and blood pressure. We need good blood work. Kids always love to get stuck with needles. Medical coupons love to pay for all these things. But we need a really good medical workup. We need to look at their thyroid. It's right here in your throat. If your thyroid isn't working right, you can be lightweight or heavyweight. You can be very small-bodied. You can look like a fetal alcohol because your thyroid's not working right. Sugar processing, glucose processing. Hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia, diabetes. Kids, right now there's huge sugar in everything out there. Some kids are very, very sensitive. Sugar does not cause ADHD, but give me a room full of kids, let me feed them sugar, and you'll see a lot of them bounce off the walls because it gives you a lot of energy that you don't know what else to do with, but it is not really ADHD. Now, the ADHD kid does not do well on sugar either, but it's not the cause. It simply makes it a little bit worse. We want to look at medications interactions. And when you've got a kid on 5, 6, 7, 8 meds, I'm certain there's medications interactions. And very often you have a pediatrician prescribing one thing, the shrink down at the mental health center prescribing something else, and the two of them don't talk to each other. And heaven only knows what kind of pharmacological soup is going on in that kiddo's brain. So we got to look at medications reactions. Now, to diagnose with a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, you need a pediatric dysmorphologist. Now, there's a nice word for you. Dysmorphologist means this is an MD who specializes in facial and body deformities. So when the general practitioner, family practitioner, pediatrician says, well, they don't look, like it to me, the dysmorphologist will be in there measuring, will say exact distances. They will take the whole meal deal here, and they are the ones that specialize in this. Now, to find pediatric dysmorphologists, I don't suggest looking in the phone book. By and large, there's going to be 2 places you will find them. University of Washington has, most of them under their contract. And the best place here in Eastern Washington is their traveling diagnostic program. And they come at least 3 times a year to this side of the state and call in, get on the list. They'll tell you when they're coming, and they'll give your kid a time to be there. And they've got a dysmorphologist there. Some tribes have dysmorphologists connected to the tribe's health center because it is a large percentage within that population they have a greater need to have it diagnosed. So some tribes, particularly on the west side, some of the larger tribes have a dysmorphologist that either comes as a traveling, to their clinic, once a month or whatever. Check if the child is tribal connected. Check with the tribe, do they have a possibility of doing this? If not, look through University of Washington. Yes, ma'am.
I'm waiting for a young boy to come from Seattle. And I'm working with the tribe over there. I don't even know what tribe I'm working with, but I know the father's enrolled here.
Okay.
And I've been waiting for him since he was 6 months old, but he had withdrawal. The eight month it took him. And now he's 14 years old, and I still haven't met him. I haven't seen him yet, but I'm still trying to get him. So that's who I would possibly...
Start over there. If he's over there and connected to the tribe, ask over there, do you have a dysmorphologist connected to your health center? If not, get him signed up with University of Washington over there. Put him on both lists. You sign him up over here, they sign him up over there, and whatever night he comes up on him first, get him into that appointment. Okay? Now, so we're going to have a good medical to see what's going on here. And then anything that comes up, we're going to take care of that and see. Because some of this is an underlying biological issue. If we take care of it, it goes away. Caregiver interviews. We need to talk to people who actually take care of this kid to see what happens. So primary caregivers, bio parents, foster parents, respite people, child care people, who spend significant amount of time with this child, and you're looking for what are the problematic behaviors, when do they blow out. One of the questions I ask, why now? Why are you seeking help now? Was there an acute thing? Has it built up, or is it just something that you need to get for this kid? Very often there's an acute trigger that has brought this in as to why we need this now. But we're looking for consistency. Do they blow out everywhere? Is there a spot that they don't? What goes on differently in that spot than goes on in the others? And we're trying to then to spread that out. What works here, we're trying to put in other places. Extensive family history. And I know y'all frequently don't know much about this. This is where we really have to put the pressure back on Children's Administration and those folks, as though they don't have enough pressure, to get more information. And we know ADHD runs in families, father to son, big time, as do many other things. Obsessive compulsive, depression, alcoholism, addictions, learning disorders. And in the fetal alcohol spectrum, we're looking to confirm the exposure of the fetus to alcohol. Now, I may be the first one to tell you this, but sometimes people lie. When you ask the person, did you use alcohol or drugs during your pregnancy? Some people won't tell you the truth. So, we can't always take the information given to us. Some people are screamingly honest. As a rule of thumb, I tend to take whatever they tell me they used and double it. And I figure I'm closer to, ballpark, but like I said, I'm a cynic. Teacher input. If this kid is old enough to be in a school or a preschool, we want to know what's going on. Teachers are excellent sources. There's always an occasional individual that we'd like to go into a different field, but by and large, they are an excellent source of information. They know what the spectrum of regular kids look like, and they have a pretty good idea when somebody is out of that spectrum versus in it. But it's real important that they compare the kid not to the worst kid in the room, but to the typical average kid. What would we expect this kid to look like? And that's what we're looking for. An in-depth clinical interview, preferably by a skilled therapist. Now, I know that when you got a medical coupon kid, you are dependent upon the community mental health system. I'm a member of that one. I'm in your RSN, your Behavioral Health Network. So I know exactly what you have in Kittitas and Yakima counties, because I have the same one. There are some good people out there, and there's some scary people out there. If you don't think you got a good eval, then scream loudly. Say, I want somebody else. You do not have to take a student. You do not have to take an intern. Sometimes they're the best skilled around because they've been most recently trained. But if you don't think they've got the skills they need, then yell loudly, call the ombudsperson, and say, I want something different. This is a publicly funded child. Your voice will be listened to. The other thing you want to do is you want to watch out for the clinician that walks out of the interview going, I don't know what's wrong with those parents. This is a delightful child. They colored me pictures. We talked. We told stories. You just had them in their absolute best setting. One-on-one with a new adult doing interesting things. They will perform their very best right then. And then they come out and go, what's wrong with you? You know? And you think, I'm going to kill you. Before you grab for their throat, smile and say, how about 3 more sessions? And then I'll ask you at the end of session 4, what your diagnosis with this kid is. Because by the end of 4, we're old and boring to them. Our toys aren't interesting anymore. We're now seeing the child you get to live with. But a way I tell my baby therapists, when they walk out going, what's wrong with those parents? And I just chuckle and say, why don't you try just a couple of more times with that kid? Then we'll know what's wrong with those parents, you know. So we want a good interview done by skilled people, usually repetitively. A one interview is often not enough. Clinical testing, there aren't good clinical tests for a lot of this. We're looking at IQ. We're looking at academic achievement, motor visual integration. We're looking at adaptive behavior. Many of us don't have the world's greatest IQ, yet we go around okay because we got good adaptive behavior. Emotional development, there's all sorts of tests and measures. Kids are not good at fitting nicely into tests and measures. So out of all of it, I would count this one least in terms of a clinical answer. Here's a test, we know they're ADHD or we know they're FASD. That's pretty shaky research out there. Now, we are lucky in Washington State as we have the #1 resource in the U.S., if not the world, on fetal alcohol and drug impacts, and that's through the University of Washington, and they do have outreach clinics all over the state. They remain our best resource for that diagnosis. So we spent all morning figuring out what we were looking at, and now I'll tell you, in the grand scheme of events, it really doesn't matter diagnostically, because a lot of it boils down to the same kinds of behaviors. And we were kind of kicking around at lunch, you know, what do you call kids? Well, I called mine Chris and Alicia and Sarah and Tess, you know, and I prefer to keep them being called things like that, as opposed to bipolar or ADHD. You know, we lose a lot of that kid when we start thinking about them as their diagnosis. So after spend all morning putting it in there, now I'm going to say, forget about it all, and, you know, we'll move forward. But I want you to think about that brain not working right. And for whatever sets of reasons, that brain's not working right. Once you've got that glitch, you have some very common behavior patterns. Now, how we're going to go at it, you have a handout that says multimodal, multidisciplinary approach. This is that 7-step model. And I put it in a circle because it looked kind of cool, and because I want you to realize that for each individual child, you may have to go up a certain spot, and you may be able to stop at step 2 for this child, where you need step 7 for that child. This is not a one-size-fits-all. You don't stop doing the things below it when you add the next one. This is all additive. But let's start by thinking the first thing that caregivers or parents need is education on the disability. That this is going to require new parenting techniques. And this is what I describe to the parents as this is not an off-the-rack kid. This is a tailored kid, and you're going to have to take slightly different care of them. Not hugely. I'm not asking people to hang upside down, but they have to realize that this kid is not the typical one that gets off the bus. Therefore, we're going to have to change how we treat these kids. And the 2 biggest pathways that we're going to effectively use are behavior management techniques and coping skill development, coping and social skills. So first we're going to assume that we have to shape and condition behavior, which means systematically rewarding those things that we are trying to grow in them and systematically not rewarding those things we are trying to extinguish in them. That does not necessarily mean punish that one. That may mean simply, I don't see it. But as I try to teach parents and folks who deal with kids, when you say, I'm ignoring you, I'm not looking at that, yes, you are. You know, you just reinforced it. So if you're going to ignore it, that really means ignore it. You know, look past it. You know, think about baseball scores, whatever makes you happy. Just think past it. Don't connect into it. We have to educate the parent or the caregiver about this kid. Now, you all are a wonderful group to talk to because most of you have had pre-service training. You've had umpteen different kinds of educational things, and you've had 75 kids come through your home. This is like, you know, preaching to the choir, which is a fun little thing at this moment. You know you have to use different techniques with these kids. The standard, my system's answer, well, we'll send the parent to the 10-week parent education course. You send a parent of one of these kids to the basic parenting course, they walk out saying, my kid is the worst person on the face of the earth. Because they're sitting in there listening to parents saying, my 3-year-old said no when I said come out of the McDonald's ball bin. You know, and you're going, yeah? My 10-year-old was doing an arabesque on the top of the habit rails in the Wendy's ball bin, you know. They're outside the netting 30 feet up. And everybody goes, oh, that's your kid? Ooh, you know, and grabs their kid and pulls away from you. You need to have a parent education group where they go, really? I took mine to the Space Needle. There was a poor choice. He was doing a handstand on the ring, you know. And you go, my kid's nowhere near as bad as I thought he was. To a certain degree, when you compare these kids to folks raised in a stable household with no things coming in, raised by June and Ward Cleaver. Some of you are old enough to remember June and Ward Cleaver. I use that reference, and my whole audience went, who? You know, God, I hate being old. But you all remember Leave It to Beaver and how delightful? You know, the biggest problems was crumbs in the butter. You know, these are not those kids. And when you start comparing them to Wally and the Beav, you know, you're going to look at this kid and say, they're horrible. The kid's going to look at themselves and say, I'm worthless. I'm going to be nothing because I am nothing. So we have to start by saying we're going to compare them to other kids with the same disabilities. You know, my daughter likes soccer, and there's a little girl on her soccer team that has a leg brace. I don't know why she has a leg brace. For whatever medical reason, she's got a leg brace. Now, these kids on this team are delightful. They are really, really good about, they will pass the ball to her and then they'll make a little wall around her so she can take it down the field. And I was asking Tess, well, you know, how do you feel about that? When you passed the ball over to her and she didn't make the goal. She says, she made it all the way down the field, Mom. That's as good as a goal. All right. You know, but for that kid to be able to have dribbled the ball for 30 feet is the equivalent of another kid making a one-kick goal. So we have to start where the kid's at and compare them to like-minded children, if you will. You know, the difference between Special Olympics and regular. So within that, we have to compare kids back to similar people. Second, assuming we've educated the parent, we've taught them some about how we're going to have to deal with this kid, that their brain is different, shrieking at them won't help, hitting them doesn't help. I know foster parents don't hit anyway, but I talk to bio parents, and they do. And, you know, to try to convince them, it's not that the child doesn't know what they did wrong, but they physically cannot prevent themselves. So if I said, jump up in the air, and you felt like doing it, many of you could jump up in the air. Now if I said, remain there, or I'm going to hit you, could you remain right about here in the air going, oh, okay. You know, so to ask some of these kids, don't do that. They know they're not supposed to. They know why they're not supposed to, but they lack the brain ability at that moment to make it stop. Smacking them at that point is only relief of your frustration, not of the child's. So we're going to educate the parent that all those things, he doesn't need just a better hit upside the head. You know, he doesn't need a stricter parent. And you'd be amazed the number of grandparents, people over the fence, and people at the coffee shop who are just delighted to say, somebody just needs to give that kid a good beating and they'll stop that, you know. You've heard that around there. That doesn't work with these kids. Absolutely won't work. I'll tell you, it won't work with most kids, but it don't work with these kids at all. Once we've got the parent understanding This is going to take a different style. Then, for some kids, that's all they need. They just needed the parent to get it, to slightly change what they were doing, and they met them more than halfway. Easy kids, we can pick them up in step 1. Most children go on to step 2. This is the Focus Behavior Management Program. And this is a great American pathway. I have parents who will object, well, why should I be giving stars, quarters, nickels, rewards, whatever, to a child for good behavior? I expect them to behave well. Well, some of you go to work for a living. Would you go if they didn't pay you? You know, I like talking to y'all, but to be perfectly honest, I would spend my Saturdays somewhere else, but they pay me to come here. So here I am with a smile on my face. Is that bribery? Or is that economics? Economics. And if we teach our children very young to pay out their behavior, you know, what do you want? What do you need? What are you willing to swap to get? Those things you want and need. Negotiation is an adult skill we want people to have. I start teaching children this tall. Negotiation. You want to be able to do A, B, C, then I have to see X, Y, Z. And I have to see it for this many days at this many things, and you do that, honey, you got it. You got 5 poker chips, you can play the video game. Around my house with 5 teenagers, at the time when we had 5 teenagers there, my strongest control of all 5 of them was the power cord off the Xbox. You know, you tick off Mom, the power cord goes with her. You know, and in that, nobody got unrestricted game time, computer time, music time. You earned every bit of that. And they just learned as a real little kid. Nothing comes for free. And by the time I had them in adolescence, they already knew. I have to do A, B, C, D. And they go, here, Mom, my homework's done. This is done. The animals are fed. My room is picked up. I want to play Xbox. Okay. And it's a matter of setting up what is rewarding for this kid. Some kids are rewarded by playing video games. Some kids are rewarded by being left alone. Some kids want to be with you. It depends on that individual child. Even though we think this should be a reward, the kid's going, I'd rather die than do this. It's not a reward, even though we think it should be. So for the child, we're going to have a focused behavior management program. Couple of rules of warning here. You cannot put one child in the household on a behavior management plan and not have everybody on a behavior management plan. It just will blow up in your face. The child will be unhappy. The others will torment them horribly. You will wish you had never done this. In my house at that point, everybody was on a behavior mod plan. Me, my husband, the kids, the dogs, everybody had a behavior mod plan. And everybody followed the same rules. It works much better that way. You can't have a new kid rule, an old kid rule, a grown-up rule. The rules have to be fairly consistent. Now, they can be age differentialed. You know, you can do this at 10 and you can do this at 13. They can be age differentialed. But they can't be, you've been here this long or you're this kind of person so you can have that. It just doesn't work that well. What we're going to do in our little kids, they like immediate visual kinds of things. The infamous stars on the chart. But I want you to combine not only the immediate reward. So you get a star on your chart, you give a verbal reward. Way to go, good job, attaboy. You know, lots of verbal strokes and praises, which eventually we're going to use instead of the shiny little stars. But in the beginning, hearing attaboy is just nowhere near as good as getting a star. So we're going to combine those two until they learn to associate the two together. So in the little kid, I want to give them an immediate reward. So they go, look, I got it in my hand. But at the same time, I want to be building a longer term, a delayed gratification. So in a little kid, standardly, and think up to about late latency, early adolescence is where my little kid standard is sitting, you're going to have 3 or 4 things scattered throughout the day that you want this kid to comply with. So standardly, a morning routine, the joy of getting the kid up and out and, you know, to school on time. You know how smooth that is around everything. It doesn't do you any good to tell the kid, I want you just to be ready. They don't know what that means. So now we're going to put down in concrete, by be ready, that means you get up when I call you. First time. If I have to go in there the second time, then, you know, you're losing your star. But you get up the first time I call you, you brush your teeth, you put on clean clothes, you come down, you have breakfast. So we know what that involves. You then gather up your breakfast dishes, you put them in the sink, you find your backpack, and you go stand by the door and wait for the bus, the ride, or I say go. So that's what get ready means. You break it down into very concrete things. Then before he heads out the door, you go, way to go. Teeth brush, ate breakfast, dishes in the sink, clothes on, backpack. Ha! You are one good dude. Stick a star on the chart. After school, you come home, you put your backpack away. Do you have homework? What are your chores? What are you supposed to be doing? So you have an after school routine that you then look at and say, you are just so fine. I am impressed with how cool you are. Got another star on the chart. If you look at the kid and go, you haven't done a dang thing of what you're supposed to do, rather than say you're being really non-compliant and hard to get along with, what we're going to do is lovingly say, gosh, you must be really tired. It's just been a really tough day for you today. I can tell you're really tired. And when you're talking elementary school age kids, one of your biggest controls is bedtime. And it's not you're going to go to bed early. Just, oh, honey, you are just so tired. You've been blowing out at school. You're fighting with me. You're fighting with your sister. You kicked the dog. I can tell you're tired. So when your normal bedtime's 8:30, you need to be in bed by 8 tonight. Let's see if that makes you better tomorrow, if you got more rest underneath you. So you're not on the kid about you're a rotten individual. You're just tired, And when the kid's having a great day, they've done the morning routine, the afternoon routine, and usually there's either a dinner time or a bedtime routine, depending on where they're more likely to blow out. Then you're going to put a routine around that time. So if they got through all three of their routines beautifully, and it fits well with this child, you may say, you're doing so great. Maybe you could stay up till 9 tonight. Kids will do the most amazing things for 30 minutes of bedtime swing. Some kids you cannot do that with because it blows them out if they stay up late. You can always put them to bed early. But in some children, they can stay up a half an hour and it won't blow them out of their sleeping pattern, and that's a huge reward for the average little kid. So by the end of the day, if you're doing well through the day, you can reward it with a bedtime, you can reward it with some sort of little special sticker. I travel a lot, and usually for lunches I will eat all these little kiddie meals because I want the toys. And I keep the toys, and for the little kids, like if I'm doing therapy with, that's my grab bag. They can reach in and grab a toy. Those are the same sorts of things you can use as rewards, not bribes, but rewards for when they're having a good day. Would you like to take something out of the toy chest? So there's different things you can do. They don't have to be expensive. Kids are monetary. They're exceedingly monetary. So for a great day, they might earn a quarter for a great day. For a pretty good day, they might get a dime. Struggle today, didn't make any money today, just like if you went to a job and blew it off, you didn't get paid. So you got the star, you got the praise, you got the monetary. So you're learning an immediate and a delayed gratification. Then across the week, Monday through Friday, we are looking for how'd you hold together this week. And then we add up the stars and how good it all did. And at the end of the week, on Friday, when we look at this all and say, you've had a fantastic week. You got 25 points, 25 stars. That means a super special. And depending on the child, maybe that means you go to McDonald's. Maybe that means you rent a video game. Maybe that means they can have a friend come over or go over to a friend's house. What is a good reward for this kid? If they had a so-so week, then okay, maybe you can watch television or play video games this afternoon, this evening, but there's no huge thing. If you've had a pretty crummy week, obviously we're struggling here, we're overextended, we're tired, so we're just going to kind of lay low this weekend. We're going to do a little yard work. Maybe we're going to clean out the closets, rearrange your sock drawer. None of it's punitive, but none of it's very fun in the grand scheme of events either. And if every time you're tying it back to how well you did in the week. And it's not the mother rag on you. Just didn't do this, but it's, if we have a better week next week, I was thinking this new thing is coming down and maybe we could go and look at it. If you had 25 points, I bet you we could go down to that show where they got the dogs are at and you could see that breed you were looking at. You were wanted to find out about, we could go down to the dog show. Got to have 25 points to do it. And then leave it out there. For older kids, and older depends on the individual child, of when they're more sophisticated, And when they're going, I ain't doing nothing for no stars, this is stupid. Now you're going to work it the other direction. Response cost. For a teen, preteen, and teen, they want privileges. They want to be on the phone, they want to be on the computer, they want to have their friends, and in that, this is you earn phone time, you earn computer time, you earn game time, you earn friend time. And you do that by doing the exact same things. We're just not putting stars on your forehead while you're doing it. Yes, ma'am.
I have had about 5 to 6 teenagers in my home.
Oh, bless you.
No. And we have tried that point system, the social worker and myself, and sit down with them. And we've been told what we can do with them and where they can go. And we have not been successful with that point system with the teenagers that I've had to deal with.
It is really tough if you're trying to impose it beginning in teen. Anything you are trying to begin parenting in teen is a really poor time to try to begin. You at least have the luxury of saying, I didn't make them this way. I got them this way, so this isn't my fault. When I'm looking at the bio parent, they're going, my teen's out of control. I go, gee, I wonder whose fault that is. But, y'all are completely blameless in this one. They landed on you in this way. We got a couple of options. If you have enough control of that environment that you can make it to they just really don't get anything without following that system. I don't like the paperwork that my agency has now come up with. I think it is ridiculous, and it takes me hours to do what is busy work. On the other hand, they don't give me my paycheck if I don't give them the paperwork. So from that standpoint, they can control my environment enough. I don't have to like it.
But to me, it's more punishment on me trying to police it.
Well, yeah, there is that little problem. Behavior mod puts everybody into it, and I often argue, and I can't make this argument with you because you're not the bio parent, but when a bio parent says to me, why should I be punished when my child's acting out? I say, because you're a bad parent. If you were a better parent, your kid wouldn't be acting like that. I won't say that to you because it's not your fault. But none of this is going to be fun in the grand scheme. And what I would do in that circumstance is tell them, you're not having a good time, I'm not having a good time, but this is where we're stuck. Until you quit smoking dope in my basement, start going to school, quit doing, whatever it is that are the unacceptable behaviors. Until that point, I can't trust you to go out of the house without me because you end up with people you shouldn't be with, you end up at places you shouldn't be, doing things you shouldn't be doing. Ergo, you can't leave the house without me or, Dad here with you. And my adolescents discovered I'm a real drag when I go along with them on things, and it just, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And please know I'm saying that with all the respect in the world. You're already putting yourself out there. But the fastest way to break up a school behavior, they're blowing out of school, go with them. My son managed to get lost. You can see the middle school from my house. From my front porch, you can see the middle school. It's right across the street from the elementary school that he attended for 6 years. So my thought was, he knew where the middle school was, silly me. One morning he left, right about the right time. He came home, right about the right time. But the school in between had called me and said, did you know Chris wasn't here today? A little closed loop at my house at that point. If my kids weren't in school, they called me. And I waited, and he came home, and he didn't mention I spent all day lost in the wilds of Waitsburg, wandering up and down, looking for the school. I was lost. He forgot to mention that. So I waited till the next morning, and I said, Chris, honey, I failed you yesterday. And I could see him going, oh, shit, you know, I don't like this. And I said, you know, when you were a little guy, I took you by the hand, and we went to school. Because you were just little, and you didn't know where it was. Honey, I failed you. I thought because you were 13, you knew where the school was. My mistake. You got lost yesterday. I'm here for you, babe. You know, I don't have to teach today. I'm not training today. I'm not at crisis today. I am here for you. Let's go. You know, I'm not walking down the street holding the hand of my 13-year-old who's going, oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. You know? We get to the bottom of the stairs, and I said, I know it's hard in middle school. You got to go from class to class to class. It's really hard. You get lost. I'll go with you. English is first, right? I'll sit right behind you. Go, Chris knows, ask him. And he looks at me and says, is there anything I can do to keep you from walking in that building? And I said, yes, you can successfully get yourself here between now and the time you graduate. Or, baby, I will be with you like white on. And he said, okie dokie. We never had another problem with him getting through high school because he knew I would do it. And if I wasn't available, his dad with his little name on his shirt would go and sit next to him going, yep, that's my kid. And I'm here because he gets lost. You know, most kids in adolescence will do anything not to be seen with you. You know, the little kid wants to be with you, the adolescent wants to be away from you. Use that. You know, and I don't like any of our political leaders, regardless of their flavor. I think they're all very strange people. But I've tried to learn something from each generation. And Clinton gave us 12 weeks of family leave. The ability to walk away from your job and sit in school with your kid if you need to make that happen. And trying to get people to do that. Again, more of a bio parent plead with them as they say, well, I can't do that. You know, I've got to work. I've got to do this. If I told you your kid had fast-moving leukemia and there was nothing we could do about it, would you bestir yourself and take him over to Hutchinson's in Seattle? Or would you say, well, guess you're going to die because I'm working, you know? Or would you bestir yourself to do this? This kind of behavior will kill your kid as rapidly as leukemia. Put them into drugs, into alcohol, into violence, into gangs, into pregnancies, into a world of hurt we don't want them into. You know, and preaching to the choir here, we got to get people to stand up and parent. And when you get an adolescent in your world who has not been parented up to that point, it is really hard to grab hold of them at that point. I would make it a strict negotiation. Here are my rules. Here are my expectations. Do you want to stay here? This is your home. You don't take anybody in it you don't think you can handle. You don't take anybody in it that they're not giving you adequate backup to be able to handle. And when you've got the tough teen, you need everybody on the same sheet of music, and you need them backing you up. And if they're not doing it, then say, thank you for the opportunity. I'll pack his stuff. Can I put it in your trunk or your back seat? You know, do not be conned. And realize you are the most precious resource we have. People willing to put themselves out for other kids. We need to give you all the support in the world that we can do. So if you got a tough kid, scream, yell, squeak loudly. Make people focus back in it. You know, social workers would love to be helpful. They're, you know, running 14 different directions. Tell them what you need. Be clear, be specific, be demanding, and make the system respond to you. But let's move through this. Okay, the child's now on a behavior management, and I'll tell you the whole household's on a behavior management. Less fun, much more structured. You cannot suddenly say, it's a gorgeous day, let's skip school and go for a picnic. Because every time you do that, every time the sun's out from that moment on, well, let's skip school, let's go have a picnic. We did it before. You know, you can't do that with these kids. But if you notice, if you pull a surprise, they blow out anyway. They don't handle switches in their universe well. If you're going to do something cool, you have to lead up to it. You have to prep them for it. You have to have them ready for it. And even then, you got a 50-50 shot it's going to blow. But you've got to be able to predict these. This allows us to predict. About half the kids with ADHD, not necessarily with the fetal alcohol, but with ADHD, about half the kids we can pick up with steps 1 and 2. We can make them very functional people without meds, without huge interventions, simply by controlling their universe and setting them up for success. When that's not enough, then we're going to go to the school system. Here's where we're going to look for that IEP, Individual Education Program. ADHD nor fetal alcohol are named disorders. It's easy, here in quotes, if you have a named disorder. Federally, they say blind, deaf, cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy. I think there's one more. But you know, there's named disorders. If you have them, they can't fight you successfully on giving you an IEP. ADHD is not listed, but there is a pathway in as alteration in attention. And there is a broad pathway you can go in there, but you have to know that's the pathway you're going in on. Ask for an IEP early in the school year, much past about February into March. They don't want to play anymore. They want to be thinking about ending the school year. They don't want to be starting new things. So in this, think about this at the beginning of the school year. One of the few times I will say label kids early is in this process. I don't like labeling, diagnosing people, because we have a tendency to look at their diagnosis and not at them as a human being. But if you don't diagnose this kid and get them an IEP in elementary school, it will be virtually impossible to initiate in middle school and high school. You can carry them forward, but they are really hard to start in middle and high school, and our kids are going to be blowing out. And in Mythical School District, at least 2 I work with, they seem to live to flunk kids out. You know, you're 15, we can now throw you out of school. And the kid's going, cool. You know, if I had known at 5 that the way to get out of school was simply to be hard to get along with, I would have never made it to the 1st grade. Some of us don't like school. I was very dyslexic. It was very hard for me to do this. I felt like an idiot. We moved all the time. I didn't want to go. Good or bad, I didn't learn. All I have to do is be a complete pain, and they'll throw me out. You know, and get the IEP in elementary school, because when they're a complete pain in adolescence, as all adolescents are known to be now and again, these at a higher level, they'll bounce them out of school. And once they're out, you will never get them back in. You have lost them forever. Yes, ma'am.
You say it's easy to do it in grade school?
It's easier.
Easier. Why is it so difficult to do it in, say, junior high? Because that's where I'm facing is junior high. So why is it a problem so I'll know before I go?
The way that the feds set it up, and it's not designed by the school, it's designed by the feds. It was under the Free and Appropriate Education Act, the IDEA Act and the Free and Appropriate Education. And what they said was there were children with profound disabilities. And it used to be, if you had cerebral palsy, mobility problems, you couldn't go to public school. They didn't have to accommodate you. And the Free and Appropriate Education Act says, yes, they do. And they started naming disabilities to make sure that Mythical School District couldn't say, well, nobody in a wheelchair. The idea from the feds was, these were such major, profound things, we should have noticed them before the kid hit adolescence. And what they aren't realizing is the natural development of a child. And adolescence is the rockiest time for most of us. For most people, there's 1 or 2 years through your adolescence that you'll look back and say were some of the most difficult portions of your life. For many people, somewhere between 13 and 15 is, you know, some really bad little turf through that time period. And when you're already carrying a basket full of yuck with you and you hit that normal rocky time period, it's real difficult. So the kid may have gotten through elementary school without really needing the IEP. People may have been juggling pretty fast, but it wasn't until hormones hit and all the adolescent stuff hit that it really broke down. It is so hard to start at that. Partly from the school standpoint, if you identify a need on an IEP, they are mandated then to have to meet it. And they say, if we identify that need, then we have to pay for it. Therefore, we don't see anything. And it's economic survival, you know, without trying to put down the schools. They're trying to stay alive. How many of us like our taxes going up, so, you know, to support our schools? We'll pay for them, but we want it used well. And when, you know, one kid is using $6,000 a month of aid in the classroom, the school is just going, good heavens. You know what we could have done with that money? But as I had a good point pointed out to me at lunch, when your child has been assaulted by another child, and they say, no, we don't want to pay for anger management for this child, how much are you going to pay in the lawsuit for when my child gets hurt? And, you know, sometimes your best defense there is to yell loudly and yell things like liability, litigation. Marvelous resource I'll talk about right at the end of the day is PAVE, Parent Advocate Group, and they are great, particularly about getting IEPs. They are so fluent in exactly what the school is required to do, exactly the right language, and they are in your references. If you look in the very back, there's a PAVE reference there. They will go with you to the school. They will argue on your behalf, on your child's behalf. They're some of the best friends you will ever make out there, and they are great folks who live to serve. So if you've got a kid that you think needs to be on an IEP, and this mythical school district's going, well, you know, he's in 8th grade, and we don't really need to. And you're going, oh, yes, we do. If they don't want to play, call PAVE. And at least in the district I'm in, there's a PAVE representative. They hear the name. They go, never mind. You know, we'll just fill it out. It'll just be easier. Ultimately, it will be cheaper if she doesn't come because she'll think of 3 things we didn't think of. There we go. So we just got to be careful in this little pathway here. But the IEP puts the school and the home on the same sheet of music. Now, I once found in Walla Walla District, I had this kid that I was working so hard on. And the classic litany when you're working with a kid with ADHD or any kind of impulsive disorder is stop, think, choose, act. Stop, think, choose, frontal lobe. In trying to get the kid to do that, it's going to take them a second or two to be able to do that. I want them to take that second in between the time the teacher asks the question and their mouth moves. Because I want them to think, what is she asking me? Do I know the answer? What would be the appropriate way to express that answer? Then I want them to act. That may take a second or two for that to all process through. And the little guy was doing great at home, doing great at daycare, doing great in many places, except school. He was blowing out every single day at school, and when he blew out. He got, you know, aggressive and violent and all that. And I think, okay, what's going on here? And I'm asking Junior, you know, stop, think, choose, because I know. It's not working. Okay. And I finally said, I have to see it. So I went to the school, and I sat in the classroom. Just sat in the back and watched it all. And the teacher would say, Timmy, what's 1 and 1? You know, 1 and 1. You know the answer? Susie, what's 1 and 1? Walla Walla District had a written 3-second response time. Written policy. You ask a child a question, you want a response in 3 seconds. If you do not have a response in 3 seconds, you prompt a second time. You do not have a response in 3 seconds there, you move on. He was taking 5 seconds to think, stop. I had to put in the IEP to move him out of the 3-second response time. But I didn't know they had a 3-second response time until I talked to a teacher saying, what are you doing? Put your hand over your mouth, shut up, and wait for him to answer. And they're going, are you kidding? They'll nail me. I had to know what the policies were. So set it up for people to succeed. The IEP is a chance to organize the environment that allows this child to succeed. And when we're looking at our older kids, thinking about teens again here for a moment, teens have a hellacious time getting up in the morning. And we have set our entire school district against what teens need. You know, our little kids who are up at 5 in the morning and watching Barney and bouncing off the walls, we send them to school at 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Our adolescents who are up till 1:30 in the morning start school on an average in the United States at 7:15. Adolescents need 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night. They're not getting it. They can't go to sleep at 8 o'clock. You can duct tape them in the bed. You can duct tape their eyes shut, take away their TV, their radio, their iPod. You can take away everything. They will not show you sleep brain waves till somewhere between 11:30 and 1:30. It's called a phase shift. Happens about mid-adolescence. When they're able to go to sleep, shifts back about 4 hours. The kid who was used to going to bed at 8:30 or 9 is now going to be looking at 12:30 or better before they're sleepy. You ever been incredibly tired but not able to sleep? It's not how tired you are, it's how much melatonin and serotonin is flowing in your brain at that moment. It has to do with a thing called circadian rhythm. Your whole circadian rhythm shifts early to mid-adolescent. Now, nature's little joke is that the average parent, late 30s, early 40s, has a phase shift the other direction. You're used to staying up till midnight or better, suddenly 10 o'clock, you're thinking, God, can't I just go to bed now? Well, that happens about the time your adolescent's going, hot diggity, I'm awake. Not a good match of nature here. You know, the adult's going to sleep and the kid's waking up. If you have a kid that you are fighting to get out of bed every morning, you know, you're dragging them out in their boxers and pouring ice water on them and then delivering them to the school wearing their underwear, stop. Redo this. Put in the IEP that he starts at 10. Drop PE, drop study hall, start him at 10, run him through in academic classes. New York, in the mid-90s, shifted their entire school district. They put their little kids starting earlier and their adolescents went to school between 10 and 5. And what they found after their 5-year study was huge drop in dropout rate. Huge increase in math scores, huge increase in reading scores. Big increase in graduation rates. We met where their brain was at. So look at the rhythm of this kid. If they absolutely cannot wake up in the morning, and school's set up to put their academics first thing in the morning, when you're bright and ready to do it. You ever slept through calculus? You know? And in that, you can't learn a darn thing when you're asleep. So look for the IEP to adjust to the needs of that child. And particularly in our adolescents, kick it back, start them later. They do much, much better, and it gets you out of that whole morning battle, which sets the day so nicely for everybody. Okay, so an IEP, many school districts are delighted to help you, a few are not.
You have a child that needs an IEP. Say she got an IEP, and then he left her home and came to my home. Would that IEP follow him, or would I have to get another IEP?
The IEP is supposed to follow the child. Now, if you go from district to district, sometimes you have to make sure it comes with them. But that's one of the things I want you asking the social workers when they're saying, would you like Timmy in your home? Say, cool, does he have an IEP, and will it be coming with him?
In most school districts, I work for Yakima School District, I'm a counselor, and that's one of the things we ask when we register students. Is this child on a current IEP? Because you do have to address what the current IEP states. But also on that factor, when you look at a request for an IEP, you need to go in and say, I want to make my student a focus of concern.
Yes.
That's the term that you need to use.
Yes.
You don't go in and say you want an IEP, because flags going to go out, and if it's a teenager, it's just like she said, it's going to be hard to get it done.
They will dig in their heels.
So you need to make your student a focus of concern, because you're looking at academics, but there's a lot of contributing factors. Are they in regular attendance? What is their behavior that's contributing to the deficiency academically? And the terminology plays a big part in it.
Huge.
So if you can get someone to go with you that know the terminology, it would be to your advantage.
Greatly so. And put things in writing, because I've discovered people can hear the most amazing things. So put things in writing, and exactly, a focus of concern is the language they're looking for.
I've done the focus of concern. It went over some of the people's head, and
Then you have to help them duck down a little bit and, you know, follow.
well, see what they try to use is, well, just retain your child if they're not on that. I've been there. It took me a year and a half, but I had to go through my own pediatrician to do it. Not through the
Certainly,
school
there can
district.
be horrendous, you know, things put up there. But when you put in writing, and you're going to write to the principal of the school, you're going to have the superintendent CC'd, and if your district is big enough to have a superintendent of special education, you're going to CC that individual also. And you're going to use, again, in that positive view, believing we're all here to work together You know, I am the foster parent, bio parent, adoptive parent of Freddie in 3rd grade. I know we all want Freddie to succeed well, and we all know he's having problems. Ergo, I want to make him a focus of concern. I want him evaluated, and I want to be informed of those results. Because some school districts, if you don't ask to be informed, won't tell you the results. Oh, did you want to know? You know, assume you have to spell it out. Many districts are very cooperative, and you don't have to do that. But if you're in mythical school district where they just flat don't want to play, then you're going to have to lay it all out. He's a focus of concern. I want him evaluated. I want those results shared with me. Based on those results, I will, in all likelihood, be requesting, i.e. demanding, an IEP. If you go to that evaluation, you know, here's what we found, that's another great place to take a PAVE person with you, because they know what to listen for, and that tells them their pathways. There's several different little pathways they can do. If they hear what the results are, it clarifies in their head what pathway you want to run.
And always keep it focused on academic. Although the kid comes with a lot of undue baggage, but your focus is academics. That's your concern.
And that's what the school is concerned about. Even though we require them to socialize our children, teach them about sex, drugs, alcohol, proper behavior, proper relationships, and read, write, and do math, you know, their mission is read, write, and do math. So we have to go in on those doorsteps, realizing it'll slop over into the other stuff or garbage they bring with them. And that's what we're looking for. We can pick up a lot of kids with behavior mod, informed parents, IEP, everybody on the same sheet of music. Give that at least 3 to 6 months to begin to make a difference. If it is not showing significant improvement, they may still not be perfect, but if they're not showing significant improvement with those 3 steps, now we may need to have them evaluated for medication. Only about half the people with ADHD or fetal alcohol require medication. Many people can do it without, but there's nothing magic about having it or not having it. It's kind of like some people can control diabetes with diet and exercise, and others need medication. It is not a statement about the person or the level of illness, just simply how the body is reacting. So if the child is still blowing out at this point, now is when we say evaluate for meds. If you bring them to Mythical Mental Health Center, the first thing 90% of them will say is meds. Meds should never be the first and should never be the only treatment piece going. It is an adjunct. It is not a magical answer. But if the IEP isn't working, you got everybody on the same sheet of music, you know what you're trying to do, you got a behavior mod program in line, they're still regularly blowing out, now we're going to look for the floor of medication. Meds will offer you a place to stand, to do the other work. It won't fix it, but it will stabilize it out enough that now he may be able to stop, think, choose, act. But he's still going to have to do that 4-step process. Nothing magic about taking the meds and suddenly you're okay. It's not like an antibiotic. It gives you a spot to stand, to do the work. You got meds on board, you got the IEP, you got everybody on the same sheet of music. Then, depending on the child and the issues, you may need individual or family counseling. But you're not counseling them about having ADHD. You're counseling them about relationships, about how to interact with other people, what to do with their anger, what to do with their sexuality, whatever are the issues that this kid is bringing along in their little satchel there. And some of your kids come with a full set of baggage. And this is where they would be working on some of that other baggage. Were you sexually abused? Were you physically abused? What's your rage level? All those things are what we will be addressing in therapy, with the knowledge that I'm working with this brain-impaired kid. But the therapy isn't about being ADHD, but it's about you're more impulsive than most. How are you going to get along with relationships? You know, do your friends ever make you mad? Well, if you said everything that you thought occasionally about your friends, would you have any friends? You know, so that's the trick with the ADHD person. They have to learn everybody occasionally is irritated with their friends, but most people have the ability not to let it go out their lips. I have to watch mine a little more closely. So we may do individual or family counseling based on specific issue there. Family needs formal and informal social supports. If you are trying to juggle these kids in your household, respite has a really nice sound to you. You know, use it. But the respite home has to be on the same sheet of music as your home. And there's at least one in the Tri-City area where essentially the kids all love to go there because they watch movies, eat popcorn, and play video games all weekend. And I have a couple of kids saying, I don't have to do any of these things because when I go to the Smiths, I can play all the video games I want, I can eat all the popcorn I want, so heck with you and your IEP and your behavior mod program. I'll just blow out on the weekends and not play during the week. That's okay. You know, you got to get everybody on the same sheet of music. So if the Smiths say, no, that's how we handle kids on the weekends, we just let them have weekend, then you need to have them not go to respite at the Smiths. You know, because it's going to make your week that much harder.
I just got through fighting that with my social worker. These two ladies sitting next to me are my respite backup. And we kind of have an understanding of behavior expectations. And so as a foster parent, you have a right to request who you want to do respite. And if you have a connection with someone that's doing the things you want done, then as a foster parent, you can continue to ask for those rights.
You betcha.
Yeah.
And in your copious spare time, you can meet with the people who are respite parents and decide who is consistent with your thing, or explain, this is what we're doing with this kiddo. This is what I would need in your house. Can you do that? Are you willing to do that? If they go, well, sure, you know, we can do that, you know, with this kid over the weekend, no big deal. Or they're, well, no, we don't. Well, then, fine, we'll just go over here. But you've got to be an active consumer in that. Work to build the relationship, work to build the understanding, keep each other informed, but use support systems. I know you're great people, but, you know, even Superman had kryptonite, and some of these kids can be kryptonite to you, you know. They can just draw this on out of you. And then everybody loses. They lose most of all. Because once again, they were able to come over top of the support system that should have been there for them. We don't want them learning that. Okay, severe cases, ones that are what I call the deep end or the blowout kids, you know, they frequently have many things going on with them. Usually by early adolescence, we may have substance issues, we may have juvenile justice involved, we may have runaway behavior, we may have sexualized behavior, either aggressive or acting out, you know, just the young lady that will have sex with anything that moves, those sorts of things. You know, when you have that level of constellation behavior, it's not just one thing, it's bunches of things. And our fetal alcohol kids are famous for blowing out everywhere, sexually, with substances, aggressively, with the juvenile justice system. At this point, you need a case manager to coordinate everything going on. This might be available through Children's Administration. They've always got the social worker, but the social worker does not always have the time or focus to do this to the level it should be done. So you can look other places for case managers. Community mental health systems have case managers, children's resource managers at the RSN level or behavioral health level. You're all in Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, which is an 11-county area that decides how mental health services are done. You have a children's resource manager. I think her name is Hill, it's Pat Hill, something like that. You have a children's resource manager. Call the Mental Health Center Comprehensive and say, who's the kitty resource manager? They will give you the name. Call her. Part of her job is to make sure that publicly funded children have the access to all the resources that they need. Because mental health centers are like any other business. We're trying to stay alive. And so when you can take a medical coupon that will pay you 20 cents or group health that will pay you $20, which do you want?
I have a child that from the time he turned 12, the school told him, you don't have to go to therapy. You have a right to deny any help. Okay, this child is now going to be 18.
He has a right to go to Walla Walla Penitentiary.
You know what? He's cutting at himself. I had to call Crisis Center, And I had been talking to the school. I said, this kid needs help. I can't do it. The IEP, they said he's already of age. You don't have to be here. He can sign for himself. I'm like, this kid's in trouble. Nobody listened. I went to court, tried to get the judge, mandatory, this child needs therapy. Judge didn't do nothing. Now this child, last Friday, was cutting himself with glass. You know what they did? Cops took him down, called crisis person, had him down there for an hour. I'm looking all over for him, hospital, the crisis center. Nobody knew where he was at. I go home. He's face down on my floor, bedroom floor. He took some medication, pain pills. The girlfriend said he took some pills. I call 911 again. They're not going to take him because they say, well, he doesn't seem like he's really in trouble. I said, this kid is in trouble, and I need the help. It wasn't until I said, if something happens to him, who is going to be liable?
Yep.
Then they took him.
Use the word liability. And, I'm a working CDMHP, so I'm one of those people who go, yeah, looks okay to me. Self-mutilation different from suicide. They're two very, very different things. Single worst thing I can do with somebody who's cutting, not saying, they're saying, I wish I was dead, I wish I was dead. But I'm going, then cut right here. Oh, God, no. They don't want to be dead. They're trying to express how they're feeling. They're trying to take this pain in here, and they're putting it out here. There's lots of things going on there. Single worst thing I can do is put him in a hospital. Second worst thing I can do is ignore it. There's a very involved community-based treatment program that I do not have time to get into today. It's a whole other thing all in itself, but I'll send you some stuff if you want, because I have an 8-hour training on it. But I'll send you the stuff that talks about what we can do. But it is so frustrating when the system looks and goes, yeah, whatever. If you're getting that reaction from me or any of my ilk out there, and in Yakima you're working through comprehensive, and Kittitas you're through comprehensive, Benton and Franklin you're through Benton Franklin crisis response, which is where I am. And when you look at that, when you call and say, Freddie took pills, we go, yeah, it's Friday, he always takes pills. Then say, hello, I need you to do a 71.34 evaluation on this kid. When you're talking about using the right words, focus of concern, if you have a child age 13, and the school was actually wrong because he doesn't have the right to refuse until age 13, not 12, but at age 13, the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, gave adolescents the right of refusal. Now, there was a good choice. I would have given 30-year-olds the right of refusal. But they decided at 13, you have enough insight, wisdom, and judgment to make all decisions in your life. Isn't that special? So if you bring me in your 12-year-old duct taped to a chair, screaming, I don't want to go to the therapist, I can put duct tape over his mouth and pour therapy on him. Now, it may or may not do any good, but I can do that. If you bring me in your 13-year-old duct taped to the same chair, if he says, I'm 13, let me out, I have to say, remove him. He does not want this. Now, 71.34, RCW 71.34. That's the involuntary treatment law for children from 13 through 17. If the child is 18, it's 71.05. That's the adult law. If you say to a CDMHP, I am requesting an evaluation under RCW 71.34 for a kid, then say ding. I have 12 hours to get eyeball to eyeball with that kid. If you can't tell me where he is, if he says, well, he's run away, then I'm kind of stuck. I will put out attempts to locate. I will, do the best to find him. But if you can say, he's at the school, he's at the ER, he's in my house, I have 12 hours to be in front of him and make an evaluation. If you requested the evaluation, if you ask me, I have to give you in writing my report. If you don't ask me, I won't offer it to you. It's a world of hurt for me to be sending these things out, because then you're all going to hold me back to what I did. But if you ask for the eval, you can ask for in writing what did we see, what were our conclusions, what did we do, and why did we do it. When people start asking for that, to be perfectly honest, we pay a whole lot more attention. In the grand scheme of events, when somebody's looking over your shoulder, do you do a better job? Look over our shoulders. If I say, I don't want to come to your house, and I'm busy, and it's a bad day, get them to an ER. Any emergency room will do. Call the cops and say transport to an ER. Many but not all cops are willing to do that. Get them to an ER, have the ER call us. We have 6 hours. If the doctor calls us, I have 3. So it's a little bit of who's calling, please, because it tells me then how long I have to do something. But, in terms of incantations to make people show up, that's the incantation. You still can't make me do what you want me to do when I get there, but you can at least hold me back a whole lot more responsible. And if you're looking at a child under the age of 13, if you call mythical mental health where we have somebody who doesn't want to play, and you say, I need this child evaluated. And I say, how old is he? You say 12. I can say, I don't evaluate 12-year-olds and hang up. Because legally, I can't evaluate a 12-year-old. However, if you say, I need help, I'm stuck. The word for under 13 is help. You yell that one, I have to respond. If you say, I want an eval, I go, I don't eval kids, bye. Don't do under 13-year-old. I don't offer. I'd be happy to help, because then you might ask me to do something.
I have this 16-year-old. I work in high school 9 through 12, and she was suicidal. And I was afraid because when I spoke with her and asked her how was she going to do it, she was able to tell me what she was going to do and everything. I called Comprehensive Mental Health, and they told me that they could not send anyone out at that time. I said, I tell you what, I'm going to put you on speakerphone. I want your name. I'm recording the time, and I got a witness that you said this to me. I got some help.
There you go. Now, I will be slightly defensive in 2 spots. One, I've been a CDMHP 29 years. I am the 2nd longest CDMHP in this state. The other one's beaten me by 6 months, and I'm contemplating killing them so I can be the longest. But I have done this job, almost 30 years. I do things differently now than I used to in the old days when I was bulletproof and invincible, and I would go running into all sorts of things. I'd be looking around going, oh, good God, what am I doing here? And it's just amazing I didn't get hurt and or killed in a number of places. My buddies are. We've now lost 3 CDMHPs on site in people's homes. Our association, we have a statewide association, is pushing real hard. We're not going into homes. We get killed there. We do not have flak jackets. We do not have guns. We do not have the ability to lay hands on somebody. A police officer can restrain somebody and be safe. I lay hands on you, it's assault. I do not have the legal right, unless I have read you your rights, that you are detained. If I lay hands on you, it's an assault. So we're stuck from that standpoint. So very often, we don't want to go to the home. One, we can't control it there. Now there's just one more adult for the kid to start blowing off against. So I'm going to send the guys in blue and say, you pick them up, you bring them here to my center, or you take them to an ER. ERs being my favorite place. I can get a talk screen there. I can get what you guys can't. I can stand there and say, pee in the cup, I need to know what's in your body, and they say, I ain't going to do it. I whistle for the nurse who stands there with the catheter. Would you like to give it to us, or would you like me to go get it? And they're going. And a couple that have said, we'll 4-point them and go get it. Because as soon as I hand them rights, I can do that. You can't do that. That's why I like it in an ER, because I want to know what's in their system. I want to know if they have overdose. If he took a whole bunch of pain pills, that could kill him. And when the cop says, well, he looks okay to me, and what medical school did you go to, and what CBC did you just get? Because I need to see the complete blood count, because I don't know what's going on here. And I don't know how to look in somebody's eyes and read their white cell count. How do you do it? That's really cool. Teach me. So I like ERs because it's got a medical thing wrapped around it. The second piece, I'm just responding to, somebody said, well, I can't come there. Yesterday morning, I was at crisis response. I got a call from Pasco High School saying, I have a 15-year-old down here talking suicide. And I said, of course it is. It's Friday morning. I said, find a parent, put her in the car with the parent, have the parent bring her here. Understandably, the counselor was saying, well, why can't you come here? Well, because at that moment, there was myself and one other person in the building, and I literally had 6 things going. I'm on for 600,000 people. I cannot be in more than one place at once. So, coming into it or to an ER, we want a safe place. You know, what ended up happening, which infuriated me, and my boss had to soothe me down before I went and hurt people, a counselor couldn't find the parent. Kid wouldn't say where parent was. So they put the kid in the car, drove them to our clinic, opened the door, shoved them out, and drove away. Anything that happened to that kid, counselor's liable.
Yeah, because we're not allowed to transport kids.
Nor am I. You know, I am not allowed to put them in my car. I do not have a state car. You know, we are not allowed to do that. So certain things put us in a box. But think about, get them to an ER, your safest setting, your fastest response time.
I think the best thing now is having the SRO officers on campus.
Yes.
Like the police have it.
Yeah, and that's a nice way. I'm a great believer in, and I cultivate relationships with the police departments. We work with 8 different police departments in the Tri-Cities between the time we got the city cops and the county cops and, you know, all that. We have 8 different police departments. Some of them are marvelous, some of them are less than marvelous, but most all of them will respond when we say, I'm issuing a detain and transport. And that's what ultimately that CDMHP could have done, would have said, I'm issuing a detain and transport order, which is essentially an arrest order. I hand it to a police officer and say, I want that one and that one and that one, go pick them up. And they say, you are now under my detention. She's arresting you, put you in cuffs, bring you over. He says, I don't know why, I'm just the middleman. I'm just the one with the cuffs. And he brings them in, I do the eval. So you're in that kind of position. If it's 13 plus, RCW 71.34, you want an evaluation. If they're under 13, you want help. Yell, help, we're obligated. And if you get, well, we don't do that, say, no, I'm not asking for an eval. I need crisis assistance. Haul your happy self out here. In Eastern Washington, all the DMHPs, the ones who can put you in against your will, are the crisis counselors. We, on this side of the state, we are the same people. On the west side, they have 2 different systems. We're the same one over here. So I can either help you or do an evaluation. If I want to be ticky, if you ask for one or the other, I won't do the other. So ask for what you need.